Someone was swimming in Rebecca Montgomery's pool again. The crystal-clear water rippled in ways it shouldn't have been rippling at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon when both she and her husband were supposed to be at work. The realization struck her like a physical blow as she stood frozen at the kitchen window, the heavy briefcase still clutched in her manicured hand, her tired eyes narrowing with suspicion. This was the third time this month she had come home early to find evidence of unexpected pool activity, and a sickening weight settled in her stomach. Rebecca set her briefcase down on the granite countertop and moved silently toward the sliding glass door that opened onto their expansive backyard. The Montgomery residence was the envy of their affluent neighborhood, 4,000 square ft of architectural brilliance. Nestled on a wooded acre lot, complete with the magazine-worthy swimming pool that had been Rebecca's non-negotiable request when they purchased the property 7 years ago. Now, that same pool was telling her a story she wasn't ready to hear. 2 damp towels lay carelessly draped over one of the lounge chairs, the expensive Egyptian cotton, a visible darker shade from moisture. A half-empty wineglass sat abandoned on the poolside table. Rebecca's jaw tightened as she noted the second glass beside it. Lipstick smudged prominently along its rim, a bright red that wasn't hers. She wore only subtle rose tones, never red, never that desperate shade of attention-seeking crimson. For 6 weeks, she had been noticing the signs. Little things at first. James suddenly volunteering to maintain the pool chemistry when he's never shown the slightest interest in home maintenance before. His late nights at the hospital becoming more frequent. Yet the hospital administration sending their quarterly insurance update to Dr. and Mrs. Montgomery showing fewer logged hours than the previous year. The mysterious calls he took in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper, the way his eyes no longer lingered on her when she dressed in the morning. Evidence, Rebecca whispered to herself, the lawyer in her automatically, cataloging every detail. It's all about the evidence. She had built her reputation as one of the city's most formidable divorce attorneys on her ability to construct airtight cases. She knew better than anyone how the smallest oversight could collapse an entire claim. How many weeping women had sat across from her describing similar scenes? How many times had she counseled patience, strategy, documentation, and now here she was staring at her own marital crime scene. Rebecca walked to the pool's edge and crouched down, running her fingers through the water. It was still warm, from the afternoon sun, but she could feel that it had been disturbed recently. She glanced at her watch. 3:17. James should be in surgery until at least 6 o'clock. He had texted her that morning, major valve replacement today, don't wait up for dinner. She stood and smoothed her charcoal pencil skirt, a habit from her courtroom days when composure was as much a weapon as legal precedent. With precise, deliberate movements, she collected both wine glasses, handling them carefully by their stems. Inside the house, she placed them in a plastic bag and tucked them away in her home office, safe behind her law degree from Yale. Fingerprints, DNA. The lawyer in her knew they might become important. In the master bathroom, Rebecca noticed more evidence. The shower door slightly ajar. Water. Droplets still clinging to the glass. James was meticulous about closing it fully. She inspected the drain and found several strands of long blonde hair tangled around the metal grate. Her own hair was chestnut brown. The blonde strands seemed to mock her, coiled there like venomous snakes. She collected these too, placing them in another evidence bag. That night, when James returned home shortly after 11, Rebecca was sitting in the living room reviewing case files. She looked up and studied her husband of 7 years, searching for visible evidence of his betrayal. He was still handsome in the way that had first attracted her, tall with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished, rather than aging. His hands, those surgeon's hands that had once traced every inch of her body with reverence, now hung awkwardly at his sides. "Tough surgery?" she asked, her voice pleasantly neutral. "The toughest? Had to repair a tear we didn't anticipate." He loosened his tie and sighed heavily. "I'm beat, Becca. I think I'll shower and head straight to bed." Rebecca nodded, noting the way he avoided direct eye contact. "Of course. Big day. Tomorrow, the Wilson deposition for me." Right, he mumbled. "Already." heading up the stairs. Good luck with that. She watched him climb the stairs, her mind already assembling a timeline. In the past 3 months, James had developed a sudden interest in their pool. He'd purchased expensive new chemicals and equipment, reading up on maintenance procedures, with an enthusiasm that had seemed touching at the time. "I want to take some of the household burden off you," he'd explained, kissing her forehead. "You work too hard." Now, the memory of that kiss felt like acid on her skin. The next morning, Rebecca left for work at her usual time, but drove around the block and parked on a side street with a place crowded and a clear view of their driveway. She waited, her heartbeat echoing in her ears, telling herself this was ridiculous, paranoid beneath her. At 9:32, a red sports car pulled into their driveway. A woman emerged, young, blonde, wearing designer athletic wear that showcased a body clearly sculpted through hours of dedicated training. She punched a code into the front gate and sauntered up the walkway as if she belonged there. Rebecca felt oddly calm as she watched the scene unfold. The numbness that settled over her was familiar, the same detachment she accessed during difficult trials. She took several photos with her phone, carefully documenting the timestamps. Then she started her car and drove to her office, her mind already spinning with calculations more complex than any legal strategy she'd ever devised. At her law firm, Pearson and Montgomery, Rebecca closed her office door and called her investigator, a former police detective who now worked exclusively for her practice. "I need surveillance on my house," she said without preamble when he answered, "specifically the pool area, cameras, audio if possible, and I need it today while I'm at the office and my husband's at the hospital." There was a pause on the other end of the place days and the places, and of the place days and the place date and the place day line. "Your house, Mrs. Montgomery?" "Yes, Frank, my house." Her voice didn't waver. "I also need a complete background check on someone. I'll send you the details and the photos I took this morning." That afternoon, her investigator installed tiny cameras throughout the property, while Rebecca sat through meetings and client consultations, her professional mask never slipping. By evening, she could access the feeds remotely through a secure app on her phone. She didn't check it that night, not wanting to see what might be happening in her own bedroom. Some evidence could wait. For 2 weeks, Rebecca gathered information methodically. The blonde woman, identified by her investigator as Amber Collins, a personal trainer at the exclusive health club where James had recently started working out, visited their home 3 to 4 times a week, always during the day when Rebecca was supposedly at work. The cameras captured everything: their poolside trysts, their showers together in the cabana bathroom, their bold use of the master bedroom. The betrayal was total, but Rebecca remained focused on her objective. This wasn't about heartbreak. This was about justice. And justice required strategy, patience, and most importantly, the perfect timing. One Tuesday morning, Rebecca called her best friend and law partner, Olivia Pearson. "I need to talk to you about something personal," Rebecca said, her voice steady. "I need your complete discretion." 3 hours later, they sat in Rebecca's office with the door locked and the blinds drawn. Rebecca played selected clips from the surveillance footage, her face impassive as Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God. Becca," Olivia whispered. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" Rebecca smiled thinly. "What I do best. Build an airtight case, wait for the perfect moment, and then." She paused, tapping her French manicured nail against her desk, "deliver a verdict they'll never forget." That evening, as Rebecca researched specialty aquatic supply stores on her laptop, a plan began to form, one that would require precise timing, unwavering nerve, and a very specific kind of surprise for the woman who thought she could swim in Rebecca Montgomery's pool. Thursday afternoons had become Amber's favorite pool day. Rebecca had tracked the pattern carefully through her surveillance footage. James would leave for the hospital by 7:15, and by 9 o'clock, the blonde personal trainer would sauna through the front gate as if she owned the place. She always arrived in her flashy red convertible, always wearing oversized designer sunglasses, and always with that irritating confidence of someone who believed she was entitled to take whatever she wanted. Today would be different. Today, Rebecca had prepared a special welcome. "You're taking a half day?" Olivia had asked that morning when Rebecca gathered her things to leave the office at noon. "That's practically unheard of." "It's important," Rebecca replied, smoothing her tailored navy suit. "Trust me on this one." On her way home, Rebecca made 2 stops. The first was at Aquatic Specialties, a store that catered to exotic fish enthusiasts, where she had placed a special order the week before. The second was at a massive home improvement warehouse where she purchased a large, heavy-duty black tarp. When she arrived home, the house was empty, exactly as she had anticipated. She changed out of her work clothes into a simple black t-shirt and jeans, clothes she could afford to dispose of later if necessary. Then she retrieved her packages from the car and went straight to the backyard. The swimming pool gleamed in the afternoon sun, a rectangle of perfect blue that had once been her sanctuary. Now it was about to become something else entirely, the stage for her first act of reclamation. Rebecca worked efficiently, her movements calm and deliberate. From the first package, she carefully removed several containers filled with water and small wriggling creatures, tadpoles, hundreds of them, dark and primitive with their bulbous heads and whip-like tails. The store clerk had been puzzled by her request for so many, but a substantial cash tip had silenced any questions. American bullfrog tadpoles, the specialist had told her. They'll grow fast in the right conditions. The adults can get as big as 8-inch and weigh up to 2 pounds. Perfect, Rebecca had thought. She released the tadpoles into the pool, watching as they dispersed quickly through the crystal clear water. Next came 2 adult bullfrogs, enormous specimens that the store had been using as breeders. They were impressively ugly, with bulging eyes and powerful back legs. She placed them gently into the water at opposite ends of the pool. "You 2 are my star performers," she whispered as they kicked powerfully away from her hands. "Make me proud." After the pool had been thoroughly populated, Rebecca carefully spread the black tarp over the entire surface, securing it around the edges with heavy decorative stones. To anyone glancing out the windows, it would appear that the pool was simply covered for maintenance. Nothing suspicious about that. She checked her watch. 2:47. Plenty of time to shower, change, and prepare for her next move. James would be attending a medical conference dinner tonight, or so he claimed. The surveillance footage from previous Thursdays suggested he would actually be meeting Amber at a hotel downtown after she finished her afternoon swim in Rebecca's pool. Today's alteration to their routine would require them to adjust their plans. Rebecca smiled at the thought as she headed inside. Let them scramble. At 3:35, Rebecca heard the front gate code being entered. She positioned herself in her home office, where she had a clear view of the driveway through one window and the pool area through another. Her phone was set to record, capturing whatever was about to unfold. Amber arrived wearing a tiny red bikini, partially covered by a sheer white cover-up that left nothing to the imagination. She carried a large designer tote bag and walked with the casual confidence of someone who felt completely at home. Rebecca watched through the window as the younger woman punched in the alarm code. James had apparently shared that with her too, and made her way through the house toward the back patio. Rebecca could hear her opening the refrigerator, likely helping herself to the expensive champagne James kept stocked. A few minutes later, Amber emerged onto the patio, champagne flute in hand, looking momentarily confused at the sight of the covered pool. "What the hell?" Rebecca heard her mutter. Amber set down her glass and bag on one of the lounge chairs and approached the pool's edge. She began to remove the heavy stones one by one, gradually pulling back the tarp to reveal the water beneath. Rebecca held her breath, waiting. The personal trainer had uncovered about a quarter of the pool when she paused, leaning forward to peer more closely at the pool water. Rebecca could see the exact moment when Amber noticed the first tadpole swimming near the surface, the slight tilt of her head, the confused narrowing of her eyes. Amber knelt down and continued pulling the tarp back, revealing more of the pool and its new inhabitants. As more tadpoles came into view, a look of disgusted bewilderment crossed her face. She stood abruptly and took several steps backward, nearly tripping over the lounge chair. Just then, one of the adult bullfrogs surfaced with a splash, its massive body breaking the water tension before diving back down. Amber screamed, a high, startled sound that echoed through the backyard. Oh my god, what the __ is that? She scrambled further away from the pool edge, knocking over her champagne glass in the process. It was exactly the reaction Rebecca had hoped for. She remained hidden in her office, recording everything as Amber frantically pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Even from inside, Rebecca could hear the panicked edge in the younger woman's voice. James. James. There's something wrong with the pool. It's full of, I don't know, tadpoles or something, and there are these huge frog things swimming around. Did you do this? A pause. No, I'm not kidding. It's disgusting. What should I do? Rebecca couldn't hear James's response, but she could see Amber becoming increasingly agitated. Well, I can't swim in this. It's completely gross. Another pause. Fine, I'll meet you there instead, but you need to call someone to fix this. It's like a swamp in there. Amber gathered her things hurriedly, casting one last revolted glance at the pool before hurrying back through the house. Rebecca waited until she heard the front door slam and the sports car engine start before she emerged from her hiding place. She walked calmly to the pool and surveyed her handiwork. The tadpoles darted around like living shadows in the clear water, while one of the bullfrogs perched on the first step of the pool stairs, regarding her with solemn protruding eyes. Phase 1 complete, she told it quietly. That evening, Rebecca drove to the downtown hotel where she knew James and Amber would be meeting. She parked across the street and waited, watching as her husband arrived in his luxury sedan 30 minutes after Amber's red convertible had pulled into the valet line. Rebecca took photographs, documenting everything with the methodical precision that had made her such a formidable attorney. She wasn't following them out of jealousy or heartbreak. She was gathering evidence for the case she was building, a case that would eventually leave James with nothing. As she sat in her car watching the hotel entrance, her phone buzzed. With a text from Olivia. Everything go as planned? Rebecca typed back. Perfect first act. The audience was suitably horrified. The next morning, Rebecca called Dr. Lincoln Blackwell, the respected family court judge who had been her mentor since law school. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe far from both the courthouse and her law office. I need your advice, Lincoln, she said after they'd exchanged pleasantries, not as a judge, but as someone who's seen hundreds of divorce cases. Lincoln's wise eyes studied her face. I was wondering when you might come to me about James, he said gently. I've noticed things haven't seemed right between you two at the last few bar association dinners. Rebecca wasn't surprised by his perception. It was one of the qualities that made him such an effective judge. He's having an affair, she stated flatly. I have irrefutable evidence. Lincoln nodded slowly. And you're building a case, aren't you? Not just for divorce, but for something more. You know me too well, Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach your eyes. I want him to lose everything, not just me, but everything he values. His reputation, his standing in the community, his financial security. Be careful, Rebecca, Lincoln warned. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it can consume you. I've seen it happen to too many people. This isn't just about revenge, Rebecca replied, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. It's about justice. He betrayed everything we built together. He brought another woman into our home, into our bed. He deserves consequences. Lincoln sighed. Just remember who you are. You're one of the finest attorneys I've ever known, but more importantly, you're a person of integrity. Don't lose that in pursuit of justice. Rebecca considered his words as she drove back to her office. Integrity. It had always been her North Star, the principle that guided both her professional and personal life. But integrity didn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes it meant standing up for yourself in ways that others might not understand. When she arrived at the office, she found an email from her investigator with an extensive background report on Amber Collins. As Rebecca scrolled through the information, a slow smile spread across her face. There, buried in the employment history section, was exactly the kind of detail she needed for the next phase of her plan. Before becoming a personal trainer, Amber had worked briefly as an aquatic rehabilitation specialist. She knew about water therapy, swimming techniques for injury recovery, and almost certainly how to recognize common water-dwelling creatures, which meant her horrified reaction to the tadpoles had been genuine. She truly hadn't expected them, and that was valuable information indeed. Rebecca picked up her phone and called a specialty aquarium supplier in the next county. "Yes," she said when they answered. "I'd like to place an order for delivery next Thursday afternoon." See, as Thursday approached, Rebecca refined her strategy with precision of a master chess player. The tadpoles had been merely the opening gambit, disturbing, but ultimately harmless. What she planned next would escalate matters considerably, transforming her carefully orchestrated revenge from a minor inconvenience into something Amber and James would never forget. On Wednesday evening, Rebecca stayed late at the office, reviewing case files until well past 9 o'clock. When she finally arrived home, James was in his study, the door partially open. She paused in the hallway, watching him for a moment. He was on the phone, speaking in the hushed tones that had become all too familiar. "I told you it's being handled." He was saying the pool guy is coming tomorrow morning. "Yes, I know it was disgusting. No, I have no idea how they got in there." Rebecca moved silently past the door and up the stairs to their bedroom. Once inside, she opened her laptop and checked the surveillance footage from earlier that day. The pool service company had indeed come at her request, not James's, and removed both the tadpoles and the adult frogs. The water had been shocked with extra chlorine and now looked pristine. Again, ready for her next act. She changed into silk pajamas and was sitting up in bed reviewing briefs when James finally came upstairs. "Working late again?" he asked, loosening his tie. "The Peterson case is going to trial next week," she replied without looking up. "The opposing counsel is trying to exclude our key witness." James nodded, vaguely, clearly uninterested. There had been a time when he would have sat beside her, asked for details, offered insights. Now he merely disappeared into the bathroom, and moments later she heard the shower running. Rebecca set aside her work and stared at the closed bathroom door. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of supporting his career, attending hospital fundraisers, hosting dinner parties for his colleagues, adjusting her schedule around his surgical calendar. 7 years of building a prison life that he had carelessly shattered for the excitement of a younger woman. In the morning, Rebecca left for work at her usual time, kissing James briefly on the cheek as she gathered her things. "I have depositions all day," she told him. "Don't wait up. I have a department meeting that will run late anyway," he replied, not meeting her eyes. She nodded, knowing the department meeting was a lie. Thursday nights had become their regular hotel rendezvous. According to her surveillance footage, instead of going to her office, however, Rebecca drove to an industrial area on the outskirts of town where she met with her second specialty supplier, a man who raised exotic reptiles for collectors and educational programs. "You sure about this, ma'am?" he asked as they loaded several containers into the trunk of her car. "These ain't dangerous, but they sure can give folks a scare." "I'm sure," Rebecca replied, handing him an envelope of cash. "It's for an educational demonstration." By noon, Rebecca had returned home and was busy with her preparations. From the containers, she carefully transferred several small water snakes into a temporary habitat she'd set up in the garage. They weren't venomous. She had no desire to actually harm anyone, but their dark, sinuous bodies and quick movements would certainly create the impression of danger. Next came 2 small alligator snapping turtles, prehistorical-looking creatures with spiked shells and powerful beaks. The reptile specialist had assured her they were juvenile specimens only about 10-inch long, but their prehistoric appearance made them look far more formidable than they actually were. The final touch was a pair of large South American caimans, lizards that resembled miniature alligators about 2 feet in length. They blinked their ancient eyes at her as she transferred them from their travel containers to a holding pen. "You're the stars of today's show," she told them, softly. "Make it convincing." After securing the rest of her supplies in the garage, Rebecca went inside to change. She selected a casual but elegant outfit, linen pants, and a silk blouse, and styled her hair carefully. Then she called Olivia. "Everything ready for this afternoon?" Olivia asked. "All set," Rebecca confirmed. "Are you prepared for your part?" "Absolutely. I'll call James at exactly 3:15 with the emergency consultation request." That should get him to the office for at least an hour. Perfect. That gives me plenty of time. Wait. At 2:30, Rebecca began the process of introducing her new aquatic performers to the pool. The water snakes went in first, immediately diving beneath the surface and disappearing into the depths. The snapping turtles followed, their prehistoric forms sinking quickly to the bottom, where they settled into the shadows. Finally, she carefully placed the caimans into the shallow end, where they floated ominously, only their eyes and the ridges of their backs visible above the waterline. With all performers in place, Rebecca partially covered the pool with the tarp again, leaving about a third of the water exposed, enough for Amber to see that the pool was usable, but not enough to reveal its new inhabitants immediately. At precisely 3:15, Rebecca received a text from Olivia. "Call Maid, he's on his way to the office." 15 minutes later, right on schedule, the red convertible pulled into the driveway. Rebecca positioned herself in the kitchen, where she could see the pool area through the window while remaining hidden from view. Her phone was set to record, capture everything. Amber entered the house using the code, dropping her designer bag on the entryway table with the casual entitlement that made Rebecca's blood boil. Today, the personal trainer wore a tiny white bikini under a transparent mesh cover-up, her blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail. Through the open window, Rebecca could hear her on the phone, presumably with, "James, I just got here. Yes, the pool looks normal again. Of course. I'll wait. For you. But I'm going for a swim first. It's 92 degrees out here." Amber ended the call and made her way to the patio, stopping to pour herself a glass of expensive champagne from the bottle James kept chilled in the wet bar refrigerator. She set her glass on the table beside a lounge chair and approached the pool, beginning to remove the tarp. Rebecca held her breath as Amber pulled back the heavy black covering, revealing more and more of the water beneath. The personal trainer seemed pleased to see the pool looking clean again, completely unaware of what lurked beneath the surface. Amber removed her cover-up and dipped one manicured toe into the water, testing the temperature. Finding it satisfactory, she descended the steps into the shallow end, submerging herself to the waist. The reaction was not immediate. The caimans, disturbed by the movement, had retreated to the middle section of the pool. The water snakes remained hidden, and the snapping turtles were still settled at the bottom. For a moment, Rebecca worried her plan might fail. Then Amber pushed us off from the steps and began to swim toward the deeper end with confident strokes. As she passed the halfway point of the pool, one of the caimans suddenly surfaced directly in her path. The scream that erupted from Amber's throat was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. She flailed backward, splashing wildly, only to feel something brush against her leg underwater. Another shriek tore from her as she caught sight of one of the water snakes gliding past. "Oh my God, help! There's something in here!" Amber thrashed toward the pool steps, her athletic prowess forgotten in her panic. As she scrambled to exit the water, one of the snapping turtles, disturbed by the commotion, rose from the bottom and surfaced nearby with its beak open. The personal trainer practically levitated out of the pool, her face contorted with horror. She collapsed onto the concrete deck, gasping and sobbing, her perfect body soaking wet and trembling. "Snakes. There are __alligators in the Fady pool." Rebecca waited, watching as Amber frantically gathered her things, not even bothering to dry off or change. The younger woman was openly crying now, fumbling with her phone as she tried to call James again. "James. James. You won't believe this. There are reptiles in your pool, actual snakes and alligators. This is insane. Someone is doing this on purpose." There was a pause, as she listened to whatever James was saying on the other end. "No, I am not overreacting. There are literally alligators swimming around in there. I could have been killed." Another pause. "I don't care about your stupid meeting. This is serious. Someone is targeting your house." Amber ended the call and fled, leaving wet footprints across the patio and through the house. Moments later, Rebecca heard the front door slam and the convertible engine roar to life. Only then did she step out onto the patio, surveying the chaotic scene with satisfaction. Amber's champagne glass lay overturned, her cover-up abandoned on a lounge chair, the pool water still rippling from the disturbance. One of the caimans floated serenely near the surface, regarding Rebecca with ancient, impassive eyes. "Well done," she told it, softly. An hour later, James came home in a state of agitation. Rebecca was sitting calmly in the living room reviewing documents for court. "Rebecca, did you see anything strange around the house today?" he demanded. She looked up. The picture of innocence. Strange? Number? Why? James ran a hand through his hair, clearly flustered. "The pool. Apparently, there are reptiles in it. Snakes and alligators, according to a neighbor who was walking by and saw them. Reptiles in our pool." Rebecca set aside her papers and stood, moving toward the patio doors with convincing concern. "That's impossible." Together, they went outside to the pool, which was now covered completely with the tarp that Rebecca had replaced after retrieving her aquatic actors. All evidence of Amber's panicked exit had been carefully removed. "I don't see anything unusual," Rebecca said, gesturing to the covered pool. "And why? Would a neighbor call you directly instead of coming to the door?" James faltered, caught in his lie. They must have my number from the neighborhood directory. Let's take a look, shall we?" Rebecca moved to remove the tarp, knowing that the reptiles were now safely back in their containers in the garage, awaiting return to their owner. When they uncovered the pool, the water was clear and undisturbed. James stared, at it in confusion. "But they said, 'Are you feeling all right, James?'" Rebecca asked, placing a concerned hand on his arm. "You've been working such long hours lately. Maybe you're under too much stress." He shook his head, bewildered. "I guess it was a mistake. Why don't you go lie down? I'll bring you some tea." As James went upstairs, Rebecca returned the tarp to its place over the pool and took out her phone. She sent a text to Olivia. "Phase 2 complete, even better than expected." Olivia replied immediately, "Ready for Phase 3, whenever you are." Rebecca smiled. Phase 3 was where everything would change, where her carefully orchestrated plan would shift from psychological warfare to legal devastation. For that, she needed James to make one critical mistake. That night, as they prepared for bed in their master suite, Rebecca noticed James checking his phone repeatedly, his brow furrowed with worry. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," he muttered. "Just a difficult patient case." Rebecca nodded sympathetically, knowing the real source of his distress. According to her surveillance system, Amber had been sending him frantic messages all evening, likely questioning her sanity after 2 terrifying pool experiences in a row. As James finally fell into an uneasy sleep beside her, Rebecca lay awake, plotting the final moves in her game. Tomorrow, she would set in motion the legal strategy she had been developing for weeks, a strategy designed to strip James of everything he valued. "You brought this on yourself," she whispered to his sleeping form. "You should have known better than to betray a woman who destroys people in court for a living." Friday morning arrived with the promise of reckoning. Rebecca woke before the alarm, her mind clear and focused despite having slept only a few hours. Beside her, James was still lost, in troubled dreams. His forehead creased with worry even in sleep. She studied him for a moment. This man who had once been the center of her world, now reduced to an opponent in the most personal case of her career. Rebecca slipped out of bed and prepared for the day with meticulous care. She selected a charcoal gray suit that she reserved for her most important court appearances. Beautifully tailored Armani that projected both authority and understated wealth. Her makeup was flawless. Her Placely Armani chestnut hair arranged in elegant waves that framed her face. She was armoring herself for battle. In the kitchen, she prepared coffee and reviewed her strategy one final time. Today was about setting the trap that would spring when James least expected it. The psychological warfare with the pool creatures had been merely the opening act, disturbing, but ultimately explainable as pranks. What came next? It would be far more devastating. When James finally came downstairs, he looked haggarded. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally confident posture was diminished. "Rough night?" Rebecca asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. "Just work stress," he muttered, not meeting her gaze. "I have 3 surgeries scheduled back-to-back today. You should take better care of yourself," she said, infusing her voice with convincing concern. "You know what Dr. Reynolds always says about physician burnout." James nodded vaguely, gulping. His coffee. I'll be late tonight. Department dinner I can't get out of. Another lie. Rebecca knew from her surveillance that he had made reservations at an upscale hotel in the next town over, likely an attempt to avoid whatever was happening at their pool. Of course, she replied smoothly. I have the Morrison case to prepare for anyway. They moved around each other in the familiar morning dance of a long married couple. Yet the intimacy was gone, replaced by hollow gestures and meaningless pleasantries. As James gathered his things to leave, Rebecca noticed him hesitate at the back window, looking out at the covered pool with obvious unease. Is something wrong? She asked. He startled slightly. No, nothing. Just thinking about calling another pool service. That water doesn't seem right. I can handle it, Rebecca offered. I have a light day at the office. Relief washed over his face. Would you? That would be great. After James left, Rebecca made several important calls. The first was to her accountant, confirming that the financial preparations she had set in motion weeks ago were complete. The second was to her private investigator requesting final copies of all surveillance footage. The third was to Dr. Lincoln Blackwell. I need a favor, Lincoln, she said when he answered. A confidential meeting with Judge Haraman this afternoon. Judge Caroline Haraman presided over the family court division and was known for her no-nonsense approach to high-asset divorce cases. She was also a close friend of Lincoln's. This is about James, isn't it? Lincoln asked, his voice heavy with concern. It's about protecting what's mine, Rebecca replied. All I'm asking for is 15 minutes of her time. Off the record. There was a long pause. 3-0 her chambers. She'll be expecting you. Thank you, Lincoln. I won't forget this. Rebecca's next stop was her law office, where Olivia was waiting with the documents they had prepared together over the past week. Transfer paperwork. For all the marital assets, power of attorney forms, property deeds, and investment account authorizations. Everything was in perfect order, requiring only James's signature to complete. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked, studying her friend's face. Once you start this process, there's no going back. Rebecca met her gaze steadily. He made his choice, Olivia. Now he gets to live with the consequences. At precisely 3 o'clock, Rebecca was seated in Judge Haraman's chambers, her posture perfect despite her churning emotions. The judge was a formidable woman in her 62nd, with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes that had intimidated countless attorneys over her 30 years on the bench. Lincoln says you needed to see me urgently. Counselor, Judge Haraman said, folding her hands on her desk. This is highly irregular. I understand, Your Honor, and I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Rebecca placed a sealed envelope on the desk. Inside, you'll find evidence of my husband's infidelity and financial misconduct. I'm not asking you to take any action now. I simply want this information on record in the event that I file for divorce in your court. Judge Haraman raised an eyebrow but didn't touch the envelope. And why bring this to me personally rather than filing through proper channels? Because when this case comes before you, and it will, I want you to understand that what follows was not done in the heat of passion or out of vindictiveness. It was a calculated response to a betrayal that threatened not just my marriage, but my financial security and professional reputation. The judge studied her for a long moment. You realize I can make no promises about how I'll rule on any future case. I'm not asking for promises, Your Honor, only awareness. Finally, Judge Haraman picked up the envelope and locked it in her desk drawer. Consider me aware, Counselor. Now, I believe we've concluded our unofficial business. Rebecca stood to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing, Your Honor. When the time comes, I'd like to request that you personally review all financial disclosures in the case. There may be inconsistencies that wouldn't be apparent to someone less experienced with complex asset structures. Judge Haraman's eyes narrowed slightly. I always review financial disclosures thoroughly, Counselor. Good day. Back at her home, Rebecca began the final preparations for the evening's confrontation. She retrieved the last of her aquatic performers from the garage, 2 massive adult bullfrogs, even larger than the previous ones, and several dozen more tadpoles, and released them into the pool, removing the tarp completely. Then, she placed a call to James's mother, Martha Montgomery. Martha, It's Rebecca. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Rebecca, dear, what a lovely surprise. You never disturb me. Rebecca had always maintained a close relationship with her mother-in-law, who had welcomed her into the family with genuine warmth from the beginning. Martha was a widow who had raised James alone after his father died of a heart attack when James was only 12. She had worked 2 jobs to put her son through medical school and had instilled in him the strong values that made his current behavior all the more disappointing. I was hoping we could have lunch tomorrow, Rebecca said carefully. There's something important I need to discuss with you. Of course, dear. Is everything all right? You sound troubled. Everything will be fine, Rebecca assured her. I just need your wisdom on a delicate matter. After ending the call, Rebecca checked her surveillance system one final time, ensuring that all cameras were functioning properly. Then she went to her home office and retrieved the folder containing all the legal documents she and Olivia had prepared. Everything was in place for the evening's confrontation. At 6:30, Rebecca received a text from her investigator. Subject 2 has left the gym and is heading your way. ETA 15 minutes. Amber had taken the bait. Despite her terrifying experiences over the past week, the personal trainer was returning to the Montgomery home. Rebecca suspected James had convinced her that the incidents were either pranks or hallucinations, possibly suggesting that Rebecca was out of town or working late again. Rebecca positioned herself in the guest bedroom that overlooked the driveway, watching as Amber's red convertible pulled in at precisely 6:45. The blonde woman emerged looking more hesitant than usual, glancing around nervously before approaching the front door. Through her surveillance app, Rebecca watched as Amber entered the security code and stepped inside. She moved cautiously through the house, calling out softly, "James, are you here yet?" When no answer came, Amber made her way to the kitchen, helping herself to a glass of wine from the refrigerator. She stood by the window, looking out at the uncovered pool with obvious apprehension. The water appeared normal from a distance, the frogs and tadpoles not immediately visible unless one looked closely. After finishing her wine, Amber seemed to gather her courage. She went upstairs to the master bathroom, a discovery that made Rebecca's blood boil anew, and emerged several minutes later wearing one of Rebecca's own robes, carrying a blood towel that she had also taken from the master suite. Rebecca watched on her phone as Amber made her way to the pool, still clearly nervous, but apparently determined to reclaim her territory. The personal trainer set down her towel and wine glass, then slipped off the stolen robe, revealing a new black bikini. Underneath, she approached the pool edge slowly, peering into the water with suspicion. From this distance, the tadpoles were barely visible, and the frogs had settled at the bottom, waiting. Apparently satisfied that the water was safe, Amber descended the steps into the shallow end. Rebecca made her move. He slipped quietly downstairs and out the side door, circling around to approach the pool area from the garden path, a route that would keep her hidden until the last moment. Amber had waded deeper into the pool, the water now at her waist, when one of the massive bullfrogs surged to the surface, with a powerful leap that sent water splashing in all directions. The personal trainer screamed, a sound of pure terror that echoed across the yard. As she frantically splashed toward the steps, the second bullfrog surfaced, and the tadpoles began to swirl around her legs. Amber's screams intensified, becoming almost hysterical as she clambered out of the pool and collapsed on the concrete deck, sobbing and gasping. "They're back. Oh my God, they're back." "Yes, they are," Rebecca said calmly, stepping into view. "And they're not the only ones." Amber froze, her face draining of color as she stared up at Rebecca in horror. Water dripped from her body, her perfect blonde hair now plastered against her scalp, her expensive makeup running down her cheeks. "You," she whispered. "Me?" Rebecca agreed, moving closer. "In my home with my husband, wearing my robe, swimming in my pool." Amber scrambled to her feet, clutching the wet towel against her body like a shield. "I can explain. Save it." Rebecca cut her off. "There's nothing you can say that I don't already know." She held up her phone, showing Amber a still image from the surveillance footage, the personal trainer, and James embracing by the pool weeks earlier. "I have hours of this. Every visit, every encounter, every disgusting moment you spent in my house, while I was working to support the lifestyle you've been enjoying." Amber's eyes widened with understanding. "The frogs, the snakes, the alligators, that was all you?" "Technically, they were caimans, not alligators," Rebecca corrected her. "And yes, that was me." "Consider it a little warning shot." "You're insane," Amber whispered, backing away. Rebecca laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humor. "No, I'm methodical. There's a difference." She gestured to the house. "Now get your things and get out. James won't be joining you tonight." "How do you know?" "I know everything," Rebecca interrupted, "including the fact that you've been seeing at least 2 other married men besides James. Did he know about Dr. Phillips at Mercy General? Or the hedge fund manager in Westlake?" Amber's shocked expression confirmed that James had indeed been ignorant of her other affairs. Rebecca felt a flicker of satisfaction at having landed this additional blow. "You have exactly 2 minutes to get dressed and leave before I call the police and have you arrested?" "For trespassing," Rebecca said, her voice deadly calm. "And if I ever see you near my home or my husband again, I'll make what happened in that pool look like a pleasant day at the beach." Amber didn't wait for further warning. She gathered her things and fled into the house, emerging moments later, fully dressed and practically running to her car. As the red convertible screeched down the driveway, Rebecca turned back to the pool where one of the bullfrogs sat on the top step, watching her with bulging eyes. "1 down," she told it, softly. "1 to go." Rebecca didn't have to wait long for James to arrive. At precisely 8:17, his luxury sedan pulled into the driveway, moving with the cautious slowness of someone who senses a trap but can't quite identify it. She watched from the kitchen window as he sat in the car for nearly a full minute, checking his phone repeatedly. No doubt he was trying to reach Amber, wondering why she wasn't answering his calls or texts. Finally, James emerged from the car, his movements stiff with tension. Rebecca positioned herself in the living room, seated in the large armchair that faced the entryway, a deliberate staging that would force him to confront her immediately upon entering. The front door opened, and James stepped inside, freezing when he saw her waiting for him. Something in her expression must have betrayed her knowledge, because the color drained from his face before she spoke a single word. "Hello, James," Rebecca said, her voice dangerously soft. "Surprised to see me home." "I imagine you were expecting someone else tonight." He attempted to recover, forcing a casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What are you talking about? I told you I had a department dinner." "Interesting. Is that what they're calling adultery these days? A department dinner?" Rebecca maintained perfect composure, though her heart was pounding. "Your girlfriend just left, by the way." He seemed rather upset about something in the pool. James's facade crumbled. He stared at her, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish gasping for oxygen. "Rebecca, I can explain." "Save it," she interrupted, rising from the chair with fluid grace. "I'm not interested in your explanations or your apologies. I've known about Amber for months." A look of confusion crossed his face. "Months? But how? Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The mysterious phone calls? The sudden interest in pool maintenance? The way you stopped looking me in the eye?" She laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "I'm a divorce attorney, James. I've heard every version of this story from hundreds of clients. The difference is I knew exactly what to do about it." Understanding dawned in his eyes, quickly followed by horror. "The frogs? The reptiles? That was you?" "Of course it was me. Did you think our pool was spontaneously generating wildlife or that some random prankster was targeting us specifically?" Rebecca moved toward the kitchen, gesturing for him to follow. "Come, I want to show you something." Dumbfounded, James trailed after her as she led him to the granite island where she had arranged a series of folders in a neat row. His medical license and hospital credentials were laid out beside them, items she had removed from his office earlier that day. "What is this?" he asked, voice with apprehension. "This," Rebecca said, tapping the first folder, "is every piece of evidence I've collected documenting your affair. Photos, videos, timestamps of Amber's visits to our home while I was at work. Very thorough, very detailed." She moved to the second folder. "This contains financial records showing how you've been spending our marital assets on your girlfriend. The jewelry, the weekend getaways, the membership at her exclusive gym. James pawed further. Rebecca, please. I'm not finished. She continued implacably, touching the third folder. This one is particularly interesting. It contains transfer documents for all of our assets, the house, the vacation property, in Aspen, your investment portfolio, everything, shifting ownership solely to me. You can't do that, James protested, finding his voice at last. Those are joint assets. You need my signature. Rebecca's smile was shark-like. That's the best part. I already have your signature on everything. Remember all those documents I asked you to sign over the past few weeks? The routine legal housekeeping and liability protections for your medical practice? James stared at her in disbelief. You tricked me into signing over our assets. No, James, you failed to read what you were signing. There's a difference. Rebecca's voice remained perfectly steady. As your wife, I had a fiduciary responsibility to protect our marital estate. As an attorney, I had the knowledge to do so effectively. And, as a woman betrayed, I had every motivation to ensure you wouldn't profit from your infidelity. This is insane, he whispered, running a trembling hand through his salt and pepper hair. You can't possibly think this will hold up in court. Actually, I know it will. Rebecca opened the third folder, revealing page after page of meticulously executed legal documents, each bearing James's authentic signature. I consulted with Judge Haraman this afternoon, off the record, of course, but she's fully aware of the situation. The mention of the formidable family court judge seemed to finally penetrate James's denial. He sank onto a kitchen stool, shoulders slumping in defeat. Why? He asked, looking up at her with genuine bewilderment. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just confront me when you first found out? Rebecca studied him for a long moment, allowing herself to really see the man she had married, not the idealized version she had held in her heart for 7 years, but the deeply flawed human being sitting before her now. Because you deserved consequences, James. Not just the discomfort of being caught, but true, lasting consequences for your choices. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You brought another woman into our home, into our bed, while I was working to build a life for us. You lied to my face every day for months. You risked my health by sleeping with someone else without protection. She gestured to the documents spread across the island. But most importantly, you underestimated me. You thought I was too busy, too trusting, or too stupid to notice what was happening right under my nose. That was your biggest mistake. James seemed to shrink further with each word. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. What happens now? Now you sign these, Rebecca said, placing a final folder before him and uncapping an expensive fountain pen, a gift she had given him on their 5th anniversary. Divorce papers already filled out with the agreed-upon division of assets. Essentially, I keep everything, and you walk away with your personal possessions, your car, and whatever you've managed to hide in your private accounts. And if I refuse, Rebecca's smile was glacial. Then we go to court where I present evidence not only of your adultery, but also of financial misconduct. I'll subpoena Amber as a witness and introduce surveillance footage showing her in our home at least 3 times a week for the 2 patients. Past 4 months, I'll depose your colleagues at the hospital who will have to testify under oath about your relationship with her. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. By the time I'm finished, your professional reputation will be in tatters. The hospital board will open an ethics investigation. Your private practice patients will find other cardiologists. And in the end, the court will award me everything anyway, plus attorney's fees. James stared at the divorce papers, the full weight of his situation crushing down on him. You've thought of everything, haven't you? That's my job, Rebecca replied simply. I plan for contingencies. I anticipate opponents' moves. I protect what's mine. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. As a summer storm gathered strength, the symbolism wasn't lost on Rebecca. The inevitable breaking of tension after weeks of building pressure. James picked up the pen with a shaking hand. Can I at least read them first? By all means, Rebecca said, gesturing graciously. Take your time. Unlike you, I have nothing to hide. As James began to review the documents, His phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts. Rebecca knew without looking that they were from Amber, likely a frantic account of her encounter with the bullfrogs and with Rebecca herself. You should answer her, Rebecca suggested mildly. She seems quite upset. James ignored the phone, focusing instead on the divorce papers with growing dismay. This is he. Paused, searching for words. This is brutal, Rebecca. Number, she corrected him. Brutal would be taking half and leaving you with half. This is justice, he continued reading, occasionally shaking, his head in disbelief. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted from shock to something approaching. Respect. I never stood a chance, did I? Not from the moment you decided to betray me, Rebecca confirmed. You married a strategist, James. You should have remembered that before you started playing games. With a deep sigh of resignation, James signed his name on every flagged line, effectively, surrendering everything they had built together over 7 years of marriage. As he signed the final page, the skies opened up outside, rain lashing against the windows and sheets. Rebecca gathered the documents carefully, returning them to their folders. I've arranged for you to stay at the Golden Pine Motel on Route 37. It's paid through the end of the month, which should give you time to find more permanent accommodations. James stared at her incredulously. You're making me leave tonight in this storm. Your clothes are already packed, she replied, gesturing to a suitcase by the front door that she had prepared earlier. And yes, tonight. I see no reason to prolong this any further. The finality in her tone seemed to trigger something in James. His shock gave way to anger, color flooding back into his face. You know what? Amber was right. About you. You're cold, calculating. No wonder I looked elsewhere. Rebecca refused to take the bait. Is that the story you told yourself to justify sleeping with a woman 15 years younger? That I was cold? Interesting, considering I was the one who arranged every anniversary celebration, who remembered every birthday, who supported your career while building my own. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I gave you everything, James. My youth, my loyalty, my unwavering support, and in return, you gave me betrayal. Thunder crashed directly overhead, as if nature itself were punctuating her words. James flinched, his momentary anger deflating. I'm sorry, he said finally, the words sounding hollow, even to his own ears. I never meant for any of this to happen. That's the problem with choices, James. They have consequences whether you meant them or not. Rebecca stepped back, creating distance between them. Now, please leave. Your key card won't work after midnight. As James gathered his suitcase and walked to the door, he paused, turning back with one final question. What will you tell my mother? Rebecca's expression softened slightly, the only crack in her otherwise perfect composure. The truth. She deserves that much. We're having lunch tomorrow. James nodded, resignation etched in every line of his face. Without another word, he stepped out into the storm, hurrying to his car. Through the downpour, Rebecca watched from the window as he drove away, the red tail lights of his sedan disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full weight of what had just transpired. She walked slowly to the living room and sank onto the sofa, emotion finally breaking through her carefully maintained facade. But the tears that slid down her cheeks weren't of sorrow or regret. They were of release, of endings and beginnings. The following afternoon, Rebecca met Martha Montgomery at their favorite bistro downtown. The older woman had always been more mother to her than her own had been, and breaking the news was harder than Rebecca had anticipated. He's been unfaithful, she said simply after they had ordered lunch for months now with a personal trainer from his gym. Martha's face registered shock, then deep disappointment, but not Rebecca. Noted disbelief. Oh, Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I filed for divorce, Rebecca continued, keeping her voice steady. James has already signed the papers. Martha reached across the table and clasped Rebecca's hand. How are you holding up, dear? Rebecca paused, searching for the right word. I'm reclaiming my life, the house, my practice, my future. They're mine again, not ours. Martha studied her for a long moment. You went after him with everything you had, didn't you? A ghost of a smile touched Rebecca's lips. You know me too well. He's my son, And I love him, Martha said slowly. But he made his bed. She squeezed Rebecca's hand. Just promise me one thing. Don't let what he did turn your heart to stone. You have too much to offer the world. 3 months later, Rebecca stood in her backyard, watching as workers completed the transformation of what had once been the swimming pool. In its place now stood a beautiful meditation garden, complete with a small koi pond, flowering plants, and a stone pathway. Olivia joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. It's beautiful, a perfect symbol of your fresh start. Rebecca nodded, taking in the peaceful scene. Out with the old, in with the new. Speaking of new, Olivia said hesitantly, have you heard about James? Only that he's taken a position at a small community hospital upstate. Quite a step down from his prestigious cardiology practice. Amber left him, Olivia added. Apparently, living in a motel room while he tried to rebuild his life wasn't the glamorous affair she had signed up for. Rebecca found she felt nothing at this news, neither satisfaction nor pity. James had simply become a closed chapter in her life, a lesson learned and integrated. That evening, as dusk settled over her newly redesigned garden, Rebecca sat on a stone bench beside the koi pond, watching the fish glide serenely through the water. One particularly large specimen, a beautiful copper and white butterfly koi, surfaced near her feet, its mouth opening and closing as if greeting her. Hello there, she said softly. Enjoying your new home? The fish circled once more before diving deeper into the pond. Rebecca smiled, taking a sip of her evening tea. The transformation was complete, not just of the yard, but of herself. Where there had once been a swimming pool that symbolized a shared life built on deception, there was now a garden of her own creation. Where there had once been a wife who trusted blindly, there was now a woman who stood firmly in her power. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Rebecca made a silent promise to herself. She would never again surrender her strength, her intelligence, or her self-worth to anyone. The lesson had been painful, but the wisdom gained was invaluable. She had survived betrayal not by becoming a victim, but by becoming a force of nature, as unstoppable and inevitable as the summer storm that had raged the night she reclaimed her life. And in that transformation lay her true victory. Rebecca Montgomery rose from the bench and walked back toward her house. Hers, alone now, in every sense of the word. Behind her, the garden glowed softly in the evening light, a living testament to the truth she had learned, that endings, even painful ones, could become beautiful beginnings, if you had the courage to transform them. If you've enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and drop a quote. Comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.